And away we go, episode 1237 of the Al Galdi podcast. It is Tuesday, January 13th, 2026. It was 1 week ago, Tuesday, January 6th, that the Washington Commanders parted with offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury, offensive line coach Bobby Johnson, and defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr. We on Monday had a variety of items relevant to our team in the 2026 NFL coaching cycle. Among the reports, NFL insider Jordan Schultz, he on Monday evening reported that the Commanders have requested to interview Carolina Panthers assistant quarterbacks coach Mike Bercovici for the Commanders' quarterbacks coach vacancy. This stands out because Mike Bercovici was a graduate assistant for Arizona State for the 2019 season, which was the freshman season of Commanders QB1 Jayden Daniels, so the first of his 3 seasons as Arizona State's QB1. Meantime, the Baltimore Ravens, they on Monday afternoon announced having interviewed Cliff Kingsbury for their head coaching job. It remains amazing to me that it could be that Kingsbury goes from no longer being wanted by the Commanders as offensive coordinator to being hired by the Ravens as head coach. We shall see. We on Monday morning had this from NFL insider Tom Pelissero of NFL Network in a post on X, quote, former Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel will interview this week for the Browns, Falcons, Titans, and Ravens head coaching jobs per sources. McDaniel also is scheduled to interview for the Lions OC job. One of the NFL's top offensive minds is in high demand, end quote. Yeah, so when it comes to why the Commanders this past Saturday morning announced having promoted assistant quarterbacks coach David Blau to offensive coordinator as opposed to waiting on hiring Mike McDaniel as offensive coordinator off the Miami Dolphins this past Thursday morning, announcing having fired McDaniel as head coach. What we discussed on Monday's show, episode 1236, now is even more true. The Commanders, in order to hire Mike McDaniel as offensive coordinator, would have had to wait for a while. And in the meantime, the well-regarded David Blau might be long gone, given that the Detroit Lions reportedly were interested in hiring him as offensive coordinator. And, of course, there'd be no guarantee that Mike McDaniel would wind up as Commanders' offensive coordinator. Look, we have no idea how David Blau will do as Commanders' offensive coordinator, but the team not waiting on Mike McDaniel and promoting David Blau to offensive coordinator, to me, does make sense. Hello and welcome to this Tuesday installment of the Al Galdi podcast. Good to have you with us. The Commanders, of course, still have a vacancy at defensive coordinator. We on Monday evening had reports that the Commanders are expected to interview fired Arizona Cardinals head coach and former Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon for the Commanders defensive coordinator vacancy. NFL insider Ian Rappaport of NFL Network has that interview happening this Thursday. I like Jonathan Gannon as a Commanders defensive coordinator candidate. Next segment, a conversation with a great guest, Pro Football Focus senior data analyst Nick Akridge. He's going to give us a high-level PFF-style X's and O's deep dive on the Commanders' search for a defensive coordinator and on the state of their defense. So you'll hear Nick on what the Commanders should be looking for in a defensive coordinator, why Commanders head coach Dan Quinn's style of defense is antiquated, the current NFL defenses that our team should be looking to mirror, what happened with linebacker Frankie Luvu, cornerback Mike Sainristil, and safety Quan Martin in the 2025 regular season, with each guy regressing big time. Why the Commanders' interior defensive line needs a lot of work. The extent to which edge defender Jacob Martin, linebacker Jordan Magee, and cornerback Tre Amos were positives in the 2025 regular season. Whether the team should be open to re-signing pending unrestricted free agent linebacker Bobby Wagner, and more. Nick Akridge, next segment on the Commanders' search for a defensive coordinator and on the state of their defense. It is not a great state, as you already know. And also on the show, reaction to a report on Monday morning from Washington Nationals insider Andrew Golden of the Washington Post that the Nats for 2026 spring training and for the 2026 regular season are expected to have at least 2 Trajectarc machines, one at the team spring training facility in West Palm Beach, Florida, and one at Nationals Park in D.C. This is a very significant development. I'll explain why. Before we get to feedback, how about the Baltimore Orioles? They on Monday afternoon announced that they, for their game against the Athletics at Oriole Park at Camden Yards this May 8th, will be giving away bobbleheads of legendary rapper and actor Tupac Shakur. Yes, Tupac. Pac. How about that? Said the O's in a post on X, quote, on May 8th, we're celebrating the life and legacy of legendary rapper and actor Tupac Shakur. Before becoming a global icon, Shakur lived in Baltimore from 1984 to 1988. He attended Baltimore School for the Arts, studying acting and poetry, a formative chapter that helped shape the artist he'd become, end quote. I was not aware that Tupac had such deep ties to Baltimore. Now, the comments to that post on X, as you might expect, were something. I'll just leave it at that. But this is a smart promotion by the O's. Tupac was murdered in September 1996, 30 years ago this September. And yet he still resonates big time today. He was just 25 when he was murdered. An all-time great, a legend, Tupac Shakur. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me, the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Feedback on the Commanders promoting David Blau to offensive coordinator from Chuck G on X on us on Monday's show, episode 1236. Having some scheduled fun with the promotion, as referenced the all-time great song Mama Said Knock You Out by LL Cool J. LL Cool J at one point in the song says, Blau, how you like me now? and I said that's what Dan Quinn is saying to his critics, off promoting David Blau to offensive coordinator. Blau, how you like me now? Yeah, Blau, how you like me now? And so from Chuck G on X, writes Chuck, bro, I love the LL Cool J reference. Blau, how you like me now? Thank you for that, Chuck G. Not to be confused with Chuck D of Public Enemy. From Matthias on X, writes Matthias, how you like me now sound drop, chef's kiss. Thank you for that, Matthias. Email from Rich, writes Rich. Al, it is amazing how many offensive coordinators we've seen enter and leave this dumpster fire. How is it I'm still in a rush to judge whether Quinn acted in desperation to land a familiar face or if Quinn recognized a rising star and creative genius? Only time will tell. The bigger question is, how great would it be if Blau established a high-scoring offense here? The opportunity to exclaim, Kablau, after every score is exciting. That namesake exclamation point followed by HTTC/R could add some flavor to Northwest Stadium and add to the humiliation of our opponent. After this season, we could all use a little fun. I can't wait to hear about our new defensive coordinator. Keeping it real, Al. Thank you very much for that, Rich. Email from a good friend of this podcast, Howard Gutman, the former United States ambassador to Belgium. Ambassador Gutman is a longtime friend of and strategic advisor for Commanders Limited Partner Mitchell Rales. Howard also is a longtime friend of Commanders Limited Partner Mark Ein. The subject of the email from the ambassador, the overlooked bright news in the Kingsbury firing, writes the ambassador. Al, I hope you are doing well. Many thoughts on the season past and the offseason ahead, but those are all for another day. I am writing about the aftermath of the recent Kingsbury firing and the supposed turmoil. As was to be expected, sports talk radio, print, and social media, and the podcasts have been ablaze with news, rumor, chatter, speculation, and endless opinions concerning the firing of Cliff Kingsbury. It has been the biggest and most debated news since the collapse of Position Flex. Diana Rossini says this was the doing of Adam Peters. John Keim thinks this was understandable. Al Galdi believes this may have been a mistake. And every Joe from Rockville and Fred from Annapolis is certain that this spells either massive doom or great success ahead. But I think that perhaps the biggest and most important takeaway from the Kingsbury affair has been totally missed by all. Maybe this was Dan Quinn, maybe Adam Peters, maybe both. This might lead to a wondrous offense or a complete flop ahead. But whichever of them made the call, and no matter how this ends up, no one can dispute that this city spent 24 years praying for owners who would bring in respected professionals as GM and coach and then would let them do their jobs as professionals saw it best. We begged for owners who would care to their core, but who understood that caring meant not getting ahead of, overruling, or second-guessing the team's professionals. Rather than experiencing turmoil, we, the fan base and the media of Washington, D.C., have just realized our greatest wish, a grand slam to mix sports and metaphors. Just like Rossini, Keim, and Galdi, just like Joe from Rockville or Fred from Annapolis, Josh Harris, Mitch Rales, Mark Ein, Magic Johnson, and the rest of the ownership group must have had their own fan-like opinions. Like every fan and talking head, the owners had to be tempted to weigh in, to side with Quinn or Peters or Kingsbury or whoever. To quote a G-rated version of the famous saying, opinions are like derrieres, everyone has one. But not everyone owns the club and could have enforced their opinion. Yet every report and indication about this firing confirms that it was made by Peters and or Quinn, taking the lead and following through, trusted to do so by an ownership group that understood its role was to listen and understand while letting the professionals make the calls. So whether the firing was good or bad, whether it works or fails, the fan base of DC has won. In the long run, that is probably the most important result we could have asked for. All the best. Thank you for the email, Ambassador Gutman. Same to you. One of the reasons that the ambassador has been a guest on this podcast numerous times is that he provides a perspective, a wisdom, a clarity that we as fans of the team so often need. Ambassador Gutman in that email made a number of very good points. Now, this is tricky because the standard for NFL ownership is not Dan Snyder. Like, he's one of the worst owners in the history of major pro sports. So to say, hey, the Commanders' current ownership group, the Josh Harris group, is better than Dan Snyder, well, yeah, that's true, but that is a low bar. But the point remains. We as fans of this team suffered through 2+ decades of wanting normal, competent ownership that allows the football people to make the football decisions, and it does appear that we have that. And that's a beautiful thing. And now the onus is on the football people to make the right football decisions. Hey, please consider subscribing to the podcast if you're not already doing that. Subscribing to the podcast costs nothing. Make sure that you never miss an episode and helps out the podcast a lot. And if you're already subscribing, thank you. What are the Washington Commanders going to do at defensive coordinator? What should they do at defensive coordinator? The team on January 6th fired defensive coordinator Joe Wood Jr. This off head coach Dan Quinn on November 10th, having announced having taken over as the team's defensive coordinator. The Commanders on February 5th, 2024, announced the hiring of Wood as defensive coordinator. He was the Dallas Cowboys secondary coach and defensive passing game coordinator January 2021 to February 2024. That span coincided precisely with Dan Quinn's time as Cowboys defensive coordinator. And the Cowboys over those 3 seasons, 2021 through 2023, had very good defenses. The Cowboys' regular season rankings in total defense per DVOA, with Dan Quinn as defensive coordinator and Joe Wood as secondary coach and defensive passing game coordinator: 2021 number 4, 2022 number 4, 2023 number 5. However, the Commanders' defenses under Dan Quinn have been bad. The Commanders for the 2024 regular season were number 23 out of 32 NFL teams in total defense per DVOA. The Commanders for the 2025 regular season were number 28 out of 32 NFL teams in total defense per DVOA. We, based on various reports, know of 3 candidates for the Commanders' defensive coordinator job: Las Vegas Raiders defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, Kansas City Chiefs defensive line coach Joe Cullen, Tennessee Titans defensive coordinator Denard Wilson, and fired Arizona Cardinals head coach Jonathan Gannon. The belief is that Raheem Morris will be a candidate if he does not get another head coaching job. The Atlanta Falcons on January 4th announced having fired Morris as head coach. The belief also is that Falcons defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich will be a candidate for the Commanders defensive coordinator job if he is not retained by the Falcons. Both Morris and Ulbrich worked with Dan Quinn during his time as Falcons head coach. I am very pleased to welcome back to the Al Galdi podcast Pro Football Focus senior data analyst Nick Akridge. Nick has graded a number of Washington games in recent seasons, so when you hear about the PFF grades of Washington players, that often has been the work of Nick. Also, Nick is a Commanders fan, so he, like the rest of us, suffered through the team in the NFL's 2025 regular season, going 5-12. You can follow Nick on X at PFF_Nick Akridge, and Akridge is spelled Akridge. Hey, Nick, hope you are enjoying our team's offseason so far. Certainly more than you enjoyed the regular season.
Very, very happy that season is over. The season from hell, as I continue to call it.
It was in so many ways. The Commanders' defense in the 2025 regular season, like the team as a whole, did get hit hard by injury. Just to be clear, do you believe that the defense still would have been bad even with, say, league average injury luck?
I still think it would have been a pretty bad defense, and people tend to forget that last year's defense was also pretty bad. It was not great. A lot of the games that they had to win was Jaden putting the team on his back. And, there were times last year that you could kind of see that the age was kind of creeping in. They couldn't keep up with some faster teams. And you just had an incredible offense that was kind of, keeping them afloat. And then they had, a lot of, timely turnovers last year. And that's the biggest thing that you kind of missed this year is you didn't have those kind of timely turnovers. You're seeing it a lot with the Bears defense this year. That defense is not great, but they're getting those timely turnovers. So you get that turnover regression to creep back in this year, and you just see kind of how bad that team really does look.
Do you have a realistic dream get for the Commanders at defensive coordinator?
I mean, I think the dream get for every team right now is Brian Flores. I think what he does on defense, it's just pure chaos, and it's so fun to watch. It's maddening to try to game plan against if you're an offense. And we saw it when the Commanders played the Vikings this year. I don't think that's a possibility, but if it's me, I'm looking outside of the Dan Quinn tree. I think we've tried this for a couple years now. Personally, I just don't think his style of defense right now is really up to par with what offenses are doing. I think you really have to kind of get with the times and kind of join that the Fangio style of defense, that too high stuff that we're seeing all the time. So if it was me, I'd be looking a little bit farther outside. But then at that point, it's like, what's the point of having Dan Quinn if you're not using his style of defense? And I'm a little hesitant to kind of see how that turns out. I just don't know if his style is really going to continue to be effective in the NFL.
Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores has an expiring contract, but the reporting has been that the Vikings want to sign him to a contract extension. Explain more, if you would. What is antiquated about the Dan Quinn style of defense?
Yeah, I think so. So this year was the biggest thing. It's too many linebackers on the field, too many bigger bodies. So biggest thing that they did was have a 5 down front. So you have basically three defensive tackles and 2 stand-up edge rushers. And one of those was Frankie Luvu, which is, again, an off-ball linebacker. So the Frankie Luvu thing just didn't really work like it worked last year where, I don't know if he's lost a step. Teams were better game planning for it, but, he's not good enough as an edge rusher to consistently win there on pass rushing downs, and when you drop him into coverage, it's been a disaster. So that's kind of the biggest thing. And then you have Wagner on the field, who is still probably one of the best run defending linebackers in the NFL. He's fantastic there. It's why his PFF grade is so high. But if you look at the splits, his run defense grade is in the 90, his coverage is in the 50s. And that's the big problem, that teams kept attacking him because him moving in space was just not working. So you finally got to see Magee come on the field. But then again, you've got 3 linebackers on the field. And when you're going against teams, that's kind of what they want. The biggest thing that the Seahawks offense did this year that was so effective is they brought heavy personnel out so you would match that personnel with bigger linebackers, defensive linemen on the field, and they still throw the ball. And that's kind of the big thing that, defenses are kind of slowly adjusting to that, where you don't have to always match their personnel. And you should be keeping some smaller guys on the field. But Then you also have the problem where the secondary was getting injured all the time and you just don't have a lot of guys. So I think injuries definitely play a factor into it. But I just think this idea that you need to kind of be bigger to stop the run is just, it's kind of outdated. You see it a lot with these too high teams that they stay too high and they're still able to stop the run. Maybe you kind of get gashed here and there and you kind of give up some long drives, but it's that bend, don't break mentality where you get down to the red zone and you're kind of always, holding them up.
And pass defense matters a lot more than run defense, right?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest, kind of studies that we've shown over the year that, stopping the run isn't as big of a deal as some people make it sound, because again, to have an effective run game on offense, everything kind of has to work perfectly, and offenses are typically bound to make mistakes. They're bound to, false start. There's a hold somewhere, running back hits the wrong hole, and you're, instead of a 10-yard gain, you're looking at just a 2-yard gain, and you stack just two, stops of, 2-3 yards, and you're looking at a much better spot, and they're forced to throw the ball. So it's not, defending the run is not as prevalent again in today's NFL as it was in the past.
What you just talked about, is that why there is this phenomenon of Dan Quinn defenses getting ripped by Shanahan-style offenses?
Yeah, that style of offense is kind of all the rage in today's NFL. And again, the NFL is very cyclical on how this sort of stuff happens. It was, the Kingsbury style where everything's spread out and, you got to defend that. And then Shanahan started to move back to, under center stuff and really running the ball there. But they just do such a great job of marrying the pass and the run that, again, they bring those heavier bodies onto the field and you think you got to match that to stop the run, and then just kind of quick, easy play action passes. And, it helps when Shanahan has someone like a George Kittle who is a fantastic run blocker, but also fantastic with the ball in his hand. So it's definitely a thing. It's definitely something where, you kind of really have to take a look and figure out, why is this constantly happening over and over again? And yeah, like you said, we saw this year that most of those games were just kind of over in the first quarter.
You've mentioned Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores. You've mentioned Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. What current NFL defenses do you view as being at the forefront of modern defense in the NFL, as being what the Commanders should strive to have?
Yeah, I like what the Rams defense does, the Chargers defense does. Again, those are teams that live in too high. They live in that Fangio style defense. Fangio is kind of the godfather basically of this sort of defense, and you're never going to get someone like that. But Flores is a bit different, where he's just kind of, okay, let's just bring everybody at the line of scrimmage and nobody knows what we're doing. We don't even know what we're doing sometimes, and it just causes complete chaos. But in terms of, structure, I really do like what those two high teams do. Like I said, with the Rams, the Chargers, Seahawks do it a little bit as well. That's kind of my style of defense. Again, you can still be successful as a single high team. You just have to kind of be better with your aggression, time your aggression better like Flores does, and that's how you can kind of succeed.
So many reasons for why the Commanders' defense in the 2025 regular season was so bad, but one of the biggest reasons was each of three key players being a lot worse this season than he was last season. Linebacker Frankie Luvu, cornerback Mike Sainristil, and safety Quan Martin. You've already talked about Luvu. What about Sainristil? What happened with him this season of his encouraging 2024 rookie season?
Yeah, Sainristil is an interesting one. So last year, our grades on him were not great. Again, it's this style of defense that you play where your pressure isn't getting home. These guys are in tough spots. They're isolated out there. They don't have a lot of help. So Sainristil's grades were kind of up and down last year, and I thought he was obviously much better last year. And this year, you kind of seen it all kind of just come crashing down. I think for him again, starting him back out at the slot just didn't work again. That's 2 straight years now that we've tried him out in the slot and it just hasn't worked. And then moving him outside, just you can kind of see in his game, especially this last week, you can just see all of the confidence gone and what he's doing and what he's seeing. He's kind of biting on everything. He's kind of, and then when he isn't biting on everything, he's late to react. So it's just tough. To me, it looks like someone that's just kind of completely lost their confidence in what they're doing. And there's just a lot of hesitancy there. And the whole defense kind of plays a factor into kind of how your coverage works. And a big thing is if you're not really trusting where your teammates are going to be, it makes it very hard for you to play defense. And you can see that all the time where they're not really trusting that, hey, if I pass this guy off, he's going to be picked up. So I've got to stay with him a little bit longer. And that causes huge problems. So you see a ton of busted coverages all year because of that. And it was just, for Sainristil, it was a mess. I'm hesitant to completely write him off, but it was really bad this year.
When it comes to Quan Martin, so this got lost in all of the news of last week, but Quan Martin in the Commanders' season-ending 24-17 win at the Eagles on January 4th played on just 9% of the Commanders' defensive snaps. He in the 2025 regular season had gotten benched in previous games, but he in that win at the Eagles got buried on the bench. Where are we with Quan Martin after 3 NFL seasons?
Yeah, I think you got to move on. 2024, 2023, in the sparing snaps he got in 23, I thought he was solid. I never thought that he was going to be, this stud safety that you can count on all the time, but he was solid. He did his job. He was kind of always in the right position. And this year was just, he was almost never in the right position. Speaking of the busted coverages, he was kind of almost always at the center of them. It always sort of involved him. And again, that's where it's kind of like, when you want to try to place a blame on, whether the coaches are at fault or the players are at fault, the coaches can't run these coverages for these guys, and they have to obviously understand where they're supposed to be every kind of given snap. And it just was a mess from the start. Just constant busted coverage, like I said. So if it's me, I'm looking to move on, whether that's, safety in the draft. Obviously, Caleb Downs is a huge talking point there. I think he could step in right away and be honestly your best defensive player. But yeah, if it's me, I'm looking to kind of move on, keep him on the, as a backup. And, even when Reeves came in for him, I thought Reeves was definitely better. So if it's me, I'm looking to kind of move on.
If Caleb Downs did fall to 7, you'd be okay with spending a top 10 pick on a safety?
Yeah, I would. I think it's kind of an outdated viewpoint where safety is not as valuable. I mean, just look at Kyle Hamilton, what he does for the Ravens. And the second he leaves the game, their defense just completely falls apart. So that's the kind of player that you're hoping you get from him. And that's the kind of player that, again, I haven't watched him too closely, but just some of the things that I've seen, that's the type of guy that I would be happy to spend a top 10 pick on.
Much more with Nick Akridge in moments, but if you are planning a wedding or you know someone who is, check out or have that person check out cateringbyuptown.com. Catering by Uptown is a great sponsor of this podcast, and Catering by Uptown delivers not just delicious food of the highest quality, but also a flawless and memorable experience tailored to your special day. Catering by Uptown's team is dedicated to meeting your every need with elegance and precision. If you visit cateringbyuptown.com and click on venues, you can set up your own personal tour of one of Catering by Uptown's premier venues, including outstanding waterfront venues. Also, Catering by Uptown is great for parties. So whether a birthday, an anniversary, a retirement, or a charity gala, Catering by Uptown understands that special events deserve to be celebrated in style. Catering by Uptown takes care of every detail so that you can enjoy your event. Catering by Uptown is a family business. It is run by the Pereiras, who are great Commanders fans and loyal supporters of this podcast. Visit cateringbyuptown.com and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. That's cateringbyuptown.com and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. We're talking Commanders defense with Pro Football Focus senior data analyst and Commanders fan Nick Akridge. You on January 5th on X had a good thread on the Commanders defense. Included in that thread, quote, "The D-line needs a difference maker at both edge and interior D-line. Lots of injuries at the edge position, but still nobody that can consistently win. The current interior combination is rough. There are flashes, but not nearly enough to offset the lack of down-to-down consistency." End quote. What you said about the interior defensive line especially stands out. I mean, Daron Payne, big money contract. Javon Kinlaw, big money contract. Johnny Newton selected with a second-round pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. But the interior defensive line needs a lot of work. Very disappointing that that's the reality.
Yeah, it's been rough for a couple years now. I've always had an up and down relationship with Daron Payne in some of his play. He makes flashes, like he is constantly kind of making these flash plays, but the down to down consistency it's just never really been there. So for me, I wouldn't have really paid him, I would have let somebody else kind of take that contract on. As for the Kinlaw signing, people know I was not a fan of that. I didn't understand that at all. We've seen it now for his entire career, where the size and the intangibles, where it's like, okay, this dude should be an absolute force on the field. And again, you see it in flashes, but the down-to-down consistency is just never been there. And it's why our grades are so much lower on him. Maybe it's a little bit harsh at times, but that's kind of, again, the consistency is what we're really kind of looking for. And those flashes are great, but if you're making a flash one of every 4 plays, and those other 3 plays you're getting washed down, kind of moved out of your gap, that's a huge problem. So those two have been rough. The Johnny Newton, we're still waiting for that guy to flash a little bit. He's had moments as a pass rusher, but for whatever reason, they just don't play him on, your obvious passing downs. He's really kind of come in on run downs, and that just doesn't make sense to me. He struggles against the run, kind of gets bullied there a little bit. I mean, the game that he came in and had a few sacks, pass rush grade 82, but run defense grade was 35, and you could kind of see it. The Cowboys were just running right at him the whole time. So, yeah, they've definitely spent some capital there, and it's not like they're not trying to fix it, but it's just the allocation of it has just not been great.
3 Commanders defensive players who in the 2025 regular season were positives to varying degrees. Edge defender Jacob Martin, linebacker Jordan Magee, cornerback Tre Amos. What do you make of each guy?
Yeah, Magee's flash for me. I'm really intrigued with him because he offers something that's so different from the other 2 linebackers, where there is some speed there. You can really see it. I think best case scenario for him is he kind of plays like a Frankie Luvu type, where Luvu last year kind of played with his hair on fire, and he was wrong a decent amount of times, but when he was right, he's making those huge plays. So Magee is kind of in the same boat right now. Young player, you can still see him definitely make some mistakes, but man, the athleticism just kind of pops whenever you watch him. There's just a difference in watching him compared to Wagner and Luvu, and you can really see him kind of keep up with guys there. As for Amos, it's tough. Again, the start of the year was kind of up and down, where the whole defense, the whole secondary kind of struggled. But he had some nice games. He had some nice moments. I'm intrigued there. I was a fan of that draft pick. And then obviously the injury kind of took over. And who was the third guy?
Jacob Martin.
Yeah, I like Martin. I mean, I liked what he brought again. A good guy to have as a rotational pass rusher. I think him in the pass rush game was, he was honestly, him and Von Miller were their best pass rushers this year, outside of Dorrance Armstrong, who got hurt. But I think that's a guy you keep, you bring back, and again, let him be a rotational pass rusher. He shouldn't really be your full-time edge rusher, but good backup, good depth to have. I liked what I saw there.
Linebacker Bobby Wagner, one of many notable Commanders players set to be unrestricted free agents in the 2026 offseason. Should the team be open to re-signing him, or is it time to part ways?
This is tough, again, because I think if you do re-sign him, you have to have a real conversation with him not playing every snap. Because on obvious passing situations, he's been a liability. But these rundowns that you could kind of bring him in for, again, he's been one of the best run defending linebackers this year. And him kind of always knowing where to be in the run game has been a huge plus for them. I just think if you're bringing him back and you're intending for him to play 100% of the snaps every single game, I think that's a mistake. But if you can kind of if he can kind of understand that, maybe he takes a step back on some passing downs, and Magee is the guy that's playing 100% of snaps, then I'd be open to it.
I mentioned that there were many reasons for why the Commanders' defense in the 2025 regular season was so bad. One of the reasons is that the defense faced a brutal slate of opposing quarterbacks. You and I previously have discussed the extent to which defenses in the modern NFL are at the mercy of the opposing quarterbacks who the defenses face. I wanted to pose a hypothetical to you to test out this truth. Scenario A: you have a defense with great talent and great coaching, but also an ultra-difficult schedule of opposing quarterbacks. Scenario B: you have a defense with mediocre talent and mediocre coaching, but also a very easy schedule of opposing quarterbacks. Which defense would you bet on having the better season?
I think it's definitely B for me. I think we kind of saw that last year where, like I said, the defense was not great last year, but they played a terrible stretch of quarterbacks. So the whole discussion this offseason was Jaden going to regress because the schedule was bad. It wasn't Jaden that was going to regress because of it. It was the defense that was going to regress because they never really played a top, tier starter. And they got to the playoffs and, we saw it really against the Lions where that was just a complete shootout. And then you got a full game against Jalen Hurts and that Eagles and we saw the 50 plus points they scored there. So I'd definitely be taking B. I think defense in today's NFL is just trying to hold on for as long as you can. Offenses have just been kind of super powered and it's just incredible what these offensive guys are doing right now. And defense, you're really just trying to hold on, force those timely turnovers. But the idea that you need to kind of build this big stacked defense, I think again is a little bit outdated. We'll see how it plays out in the playoffs this year because I think the Broncos are kind of a perfect example of that, where they've got this incredible defense, but offense at times is just kind of it's up or down. You don't really know what you're going to get week in and week out. And but yeah, if it's me, I'm just trying to kind of build an average defense and just kind of hope to hold on.
So when it comes to what is most important for defense in the current NFL, if we're talking talent, coaching, and schedule of opposing quarterbacks, are we now at the point at which schedule of opposing quarterbacks is most important?
Sort of. I wouldn't say it's a clear cut number one because I think talent on the other end can really affect quarterbacks specifically at a pass rushing position. I mean, it, but it's tough because again, you see players like Myles Garrett who had probably the best year we've ever seen a defensive player ever have, and his team was still terrible, and the defense was pretty good, but again, they can only hold on for so long. So I think again, who you play is a big deal for defenses, and that kind of is going to show how well you're going to be. It sucks to kind of hear that, and that's a terrible way to try to watch football in the future. It's like, oh, we're playing a good quarterback, we're screwed. But there are things that you can do to kind of slow that quarterback down, and having a premier pass rusher is a huge thing for that. It can make offenses kind of take all of their focus onto that player. And same thing for having shut down corners. In today's NFL, I don't know if it's as important because there's not a lot of defenses that are going to have guys just travel with the number one receiver. That just does not happen in today's NFL anymore. So there's still things that you can do, and having that premier talent definitely helps. I think really linebacker is one of the most important positions. I think it's outside of quarterback, I think it's the toughest position to play in the NFL. There's so much to do, so much to try to understand. And offensive coordinators, their entire goal is just to make your linebacker look wrong. And so I think that's kind of the big position. If you have someone there that can kind of really be a force as a coverage player, then I think you have your chance of having a really good defense.
That's interesting. So regarding the positional hierarchy on defense, the notion of edge defender or cornerback being most important may be wrong. Linebacker may actually be most important.
I think the floor of the linebacker is the most important position, if that makes sense. So you can't really have somebody, again, like we saw this year, that's complete liability in coverage. You're going to get picked on at times at linebacker. You're going to be wrong a lot of the times. If you look at our grades, coverage grades for linebackers, there's very few that are going to have the top tier of grades because there's always going to be moments where you're just going to be wrong. That's just kind of the design of the offense. It's you're going to be wrong, but having a floor, a sustainable floor where you're not going to constantly bust coverages. I think that's the most important part. Where again, you don't need a Fred Warner to have a outstanding defense, but you need someone who is going to elevate the floor where you're always in position. Again, there's going to be times where even if you're in position, you're going to be wrong, but you're always in position. And we saw that this year, that there were times that they were just really almost never in position, and that was kind of the big problem.
Excellent. Pro Football Focus senior data analyst and Commanders fan Nick Akridge. Nick, thanks. All the best.
Yeah, appreciate it.
There are two things about the Washington Nationals baseball operations revamping in MLB's 2025-2026 offseason that are especially encouraging. The first thing is that the team is going in on analytics and sports science like never before. The second thing, and it is related to the first thing, is that team ownership, the Lerner Group, is spending on infrastructure in a manner in which the group seemingly has never before. Now, when it comes to the Lerner Group, there is a lot more that we need to see before we can say that the group is all in on owning the Nats. But the team this offseason clearly is spending money on the new look front office, led by President of Baseball Operations Paul Taboni and General Manager Anirudh Kalambi. And we have had signs that the team this offseason is spending on the necessary tools in MLB in 2026. And we on Monday morning got another such sign. Nats insider Andrew Golden of the Washington Post, he in a piece that came out on Monday morning reported that the Nats for 2026 spring training and for the 2026 regular season are expected to have at least two Traject Arc machines, one at the team spring training facility in West Palm Beach, Florida, and one at Nationals Park in D.C. And the Nats having at least two Traject Arc machines is significant. Traject Arc, Trajekt space ARC. Nats insider Spencer Nussbaum of the Washington Post, he had a piece that came out last June 30th, wrote about the Nats using a headset and virtual reality program called Win Reality instead of having invested in the more advanced, more expensive pitching machine called Traject Arc, which has become really popular in MLB. Read the piece, quote, "The cost for Traject Arc varies based on team, league, and version, but a typical commitment is roughly $500,000 or around $15,000 per month on a 3-year contract. By comparison, Washington's player payroll is roughly $120 million for this season alone." The Nationals declined to comment when asked why they had not invested in the technology, end quote. Whether the Nats did not have a Traject Arc machine was due to the Lerner Group not being willing to spend on such a machine, or was due to then President of Baseball Operations and General Manager Mike Rizzo not thinking much of the machine, or both, we don't know. But the Nats not having a Traject Arc machine was emblematic of the team being so behind the times in MLB when it comes to analytics and sports science. Well, now, hopefully, the Nats are catching up. And that'll do it for you and me for now. Keep the feedback coming. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Wednesday show, episode 1238, will include a lot for you on the Washington Commanders. Also on Wednesday's show, I'll talk Washington Capitals and college basketball. The Caps are home to the Montreal Canadiens Tuesday night at 7. Maryland is at USC Tuesday night at 10:30. Georgetown is at Creighton Tuesday night at 9. Number 16 Virginia is at number 20 Louisville Tuesday night at 7, and George Mason is at Loyola Chicago Tuesday night at 7. Tuesday night, a busy night. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.